My fiancée said I was just a broke loser without her daddy's help, so I cut them ties. And what happened years later made them regret every word. My fiancée said I was just a broke loser without her daddy's help. So I cut them ties, and what happened years later made them regret every word. I'm Christopher, 28, and I thought I had life figured out. Solid logistics coordinator position at Premier Transportation Solutions in downtown Chicago, decent studio apartment in Lincoln Park, and a fiancée, Brittany, 26, who I'd been with for 5 years. We were supposed to get married in 6 months. Her father, William Thornton, basically owned half the transportation industry in Illinois. The man was a senior vice president with connections reaching from Detroit to Dallas. He got me my interview 3 years back, which seemed like divine intervention at the time. Brittany's family embodied that old money Chicago elite mentality where they genuinely believed their bloodline made them superior. William would casually mention how he built men's careers, and how loyalty was everything in business. Her mother, Catherine, would correct waiters at Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse about wine pairings and tip exactly 15% because that's what service people expect. These people had never heard the word no in their privileged lives. The contrast with my own family was stark. My parents, James and Linda, raised me and my older brother, Nathan, with solid working-class values on the South Side. Dad worked as a public school principal. Mom was a registered nurse at Rush University Medical Center. They taught us that respect comes through character, not bank statements. Nathan, 31, works in construction management for a major Chicago firm. He never liked Brittany from day one. She talks to you like you're her personal assistant, he told me after the first family dinner where she met everyone. And the way she corrected Mom about how to properly serve pot roast? Who does that? I defended Brittany back then, making excuses about her being nervous or wanting to help. But Nathan just shook his head. Chris, nobody disrespects our parents in their own house. I don't care how much money her family has. The red flags were always there, but I was too caught up in the lifestyle to see them clearly. Brittany would introduce me at charity galas as my fiancé who works for Daddy's company, like I was some employee benefit she'd earned. She'd order my meals at restaurants, interrupt my conversations to clarify details, and had this habit of touching my arm while laughing at other men's jokes, like she was showing off her well-trained boyfriend. My parents only met Brittany's family twice, but that was enough. I've never felt so uncomfortable at a dinner party, Mom later told me. They kept asking about our little house, and whether we'd ever considered upgrading, like our home wasn't good enough for their future son-in-law. Dad was more direct. That girl doesn't respect you, Christopher. She talks over you, corrects you in front of people, and treats our family like we're charity cases. You sure this is what you want? But I was in too deep to listen. The wedding planning would soon reveal who she really was. And what happened next would change everything. The wedding planning revealed Brittany's true nature like a surgical spotlight cutting through shadows. We're talking about a $150,000 ceremony for 400 people, most of whom I'd never met. When I suggested maybe starting smaller, she looked at me like I'd suggested getting married at McDonald's. Christopher, this isn't about what we want. This is about maintaining our family's reputation. People expect a certain standard from the Thorntons. Like I'd been adopted into royalty instead of dating a logistics executive's daughter. She'd spend hours on her iPhone coordinating with vendors at the Drake Hotel, talking down to them like they were servants. I watched her make the wedding florist redo an entire centerpiece proposal 3 times because the shade of ivory wasn't sophisticated enough. The woman was literally screaming at someone about flower arrangements while I'm thinking we could buy a BMW with what she wanted to spend on decorations that'd be thrown away after one night. When I mentioned wanting my parents to help with some planning decisions, Brittany's response was swift and brutal. Christopher, my mother has coordinated dozens of events like this. Your parents are sweet, but they've never organized anything more complicated than a backyard barbecue. Let's leave this to the professionals. The breaking point came during our final venue walkthrough at the Chicago Athletic Association. The wedding coordinator asked about my guest list, and I mentioned wanting to include my college roommate, Marcus, and some coworkers who weren't in management positions. Brittany actually held up her hand to stop me mid-sentence. We've discussed this, Christopher. Your college friends don't really fit the aesthetic we're going for, and inviting people below director level from the company could send the wrong message about hierarchy. Right there in front of the wedding planner, she reduced my closest friends to props that didn't match her vision. I felt my face burn with embarrassment, but I stayed quiet. That night, driving home in her Mercedes through downtown Chicago, the tension was thick enough to cut with a steak knife. You embarrassed me today, she said, not even looking up from her phone. Daddy's already concerned about your judgment, and suggesting we invite your drinking buddies doesn't help your case. I asked what case she was talking about. That's when she laid it out like a corporate restructuring plan. Let's be realistic, Christopher. Your salary is adequate for paying your bills, but it's basically pocket change compared to what Daddy provides. Without this family, without his connections, you're nothing. You were some guy sharing a crappy apartment in Wicker Park making $42,000 a year before Daddy gave you a chance. She paused to let that sink in. Don't forget where you came from. 5 years of my life reduced to charity work. Every promotion I'd earned, every late night I'd worked, every success I'd achieved, all just William throwing me scraps. You know that moment in Goodfellas when Henry realizes the life isn't what he thought it was? That's what hit me like a Chicago L train. Everything clicked into place. The condescending comments, the way she managed my social interactions, how she'd correct me in front of her friends like I was some rough diamond she was polishing. I looked at her scrolling through Instagram, probably posting about our perfect venue visit, and said the 2 words that changed everything. We're done. She didn't even look up at first. Don't be dramatic, Christopher. You're having pre-wedding nerves. No, Brittany. We're done. The engagement is off. I'm done. That got her attention. The iPhone dropped, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine shock on her face. But instead of hurt or sadness, what came next was pure entitled rage. She started screaming about how I was ruining everything and how dare I humiliate her family like this. Do you have any idea what this will do to our reputation? We've already sent save the dates to 300 people. I'll have to explain to everyone that my fiancé had some kind of mental breakdown. Not that I was unhappy. Not that we had problems to work through. Just that I was inconveniencing her social calendar. When I started packing a duffel bag, she shifted tactics. Tears, promises to work on things, offers to scale back the wedding to a mere $50,000. But I was already mentally gone. The person crying on her Egyptian cotton sheets wasn't someone I'd ever actually known, just a character she'd performed to keep me in line. Then came the threats. She called William while I was still packing, putting him on speaker like she was summoning backup. Daddy, Christopher's having some kind of episode. He says he's leaving. You need to talk to him. Within 30 minutes, both parents were at our Lincoln Park apartment. William looked like a man whose stock portfolio had just crashed. Catherine kept asking if I'd been drinking or if there was someone else involved. They genuinely couldn't comprehend that their perfect daughter might not be irresistible to everyone. Son, let's think about this rationally, William said like he was closing a merger deal. You're obviously under stress. Wedding planning affects everyone differently. Why don't you take a week in the Hamptons to cool off? Maybe talk to someone professional. When I told him there was nothing to think about, his whole demeanor changed. The friendly father figure mask dropped, and I saw the corporate predator underneath. Christopher, I'm going to say this once. You're making a mistake that will follow you for the rest of your career. This family has given you everything you have. Walk away from us and you'll find out how cold the real world can be. I thanked him for the threat and walked out. I spent that night at Marcus's place in Bucktown, but the first call I made was to Nathan. About damn time, he said when I told him what happened. I've been waiting 5 years for you to wake up. That whole family treats people like servants. You want me to come get you? I'm good for tonight, but thanks. Chris, seriously, I know this hurts right now, but you just dodged a bullet the size of a freight train. She would have spent the rest of your life making you feel like you weren't good enough. The next morning, Nathan showed up at Marcus's place with Dunkin' coffee and that brutal honesty I'd been missing for years. Look, I know you loved her, but love isn't supposed to make you feel small. The way she talked to mom and dad, the way she dismissed your friends, the way she managed every conversation you tried to have, that's not a partner, that's a warden. Little did I know my real journey was just beginning. I called my parents that morning to tell them the engagement was off. Mom's response was immediate relief and Dad was direct. Best decision you've made in 5 years, son. Their support meant everything, especially when I walked into HR that Monday with my resignation letter. My direct supervisor, Kevin Martinez, was confused but professional about it. Within 2 hours, though, I was getting pulled into meetings with senior leadership. William had clearly made calls, trying to retain me before I could leave with whatever inside knowledge I supposedly had. Is there anything we can do to address your concerns? Asked the VP of Operations like I was negotiating a contract renewal. William speaks very highly of your potential here. I kept it simple, family circumstances, exploring new opportunities, grateful for the experience, but I could see them exchanging glances. Nobody quits a good job right before their wedding unless there's serious drama. By Wednesday, Brittany was blowing up my phone with increasingly unhinged messages. Started with apologies and promises to change, escalated to accusations that I was throwing away 5 years over nothing, and ended with threats about what would happen if I tried to embarrass her family. Nathan read some of the messages and his face went dark. "This is harassment, Chris. She's threatening your career, your reputation, everything. You need to document all of this in case it escalates." The final message was pure Brittany. "You think you can just walk away from us, from everything we built together? You'll be back when you realize you can't make it without Daddy's help. Don't expect the door to still be open." That's when I knew I wasn't just leaving a toxic relationship. I was escaping people who viewed other humans as property. The first month of freedom felt like waking up from a fever dream. I'd forgotten what it felt like to make decisions without running them past someone who'd find 3 problems with every choice. My parents offered to let me stay with them in their Bridgeport house while I figured things out, but I needed my own space to rebuild. I found a small apartment in Logan Square. Nathan helped me move and we made a day of it, grabbed Italian beef from AL's, talked about the future, and for the first time in years I felt like myself again. "You know what's crazy?" Nathan said while we were setting up my living room. "You're actually smiling again. I haven't seen that relaxed look on your face since before you started dating her." My business plan had been brewing for months. Supply chain optimization for mid-size companies was a perfect niche. Big corporations had internal teams. Small businesses couldn't afford specialists. But there was a sweet spot in the middle where companies needed expertise but couldn't justify a full-time hire. Dad was immediately supportive when I explained the concept. "You've got the knowledge and the work ethic, Christopher. If anyone can make this work, it's you. Your mother and I didn't raise quitters. I wanted to do this completely on my own. My savings weren't huge, but enough to live lean for 6 months while building a client base. I'd learned logistics inside and out at Williams' company, and I knew the industry well enough to spot opportunities their internal teams missed. But 3 weeks after I left, weird things started happening. Cold calls to potential clients were getting cut short. Guys I'd worked with for years were suddenly too busy to meet for coffee. One contact, someone who'd seemed genuinely interested in working together, canceled our lunch meeting with a vague excuse about timing not being right. Then my neighbor mentioned seeing a black Escalade parked outside my Logan Square building multiple times. Same vehicle, always during business hours when most people were at work. I mentioned it to Nathan during our weekly check-in at Pequod's Pizza. "They're watching you," he said matter-of-factly. "These people are used to controlling everything around them. They can't handle someone walking away, so they're trying to gather ammunition to bring you back into line." The breakthrough came when I finally connected with a mid-sized furniture manufacturer through a Northwestern connection who didn't run in Williams circles. Their CEO, Frank Kowalski, was old-school Polish-American who'd built his business from nothing on Chicago's Northwest Side. When I explained my background and what I could offer, he was interested enough to let me analyze their distribution system. I spent 2 weeks mapping their entire supply chain, found redundancies costing them $60,000 annually, identified bottlenecks causing delivery delays, and developed a restructuring plan that would pay for itself within 6 months. But while I'm working on Frank's project, the harassment from Brittany's camp started ramping up. Mutual friends were getting calls asking about my mental state and whether I was handling the stress of starting a business. Catherine was posting Facebook messages about how some people need professional help during major life changes. Mom was the first to notice the social media campaign. "Christopher, that woman is posting about you online. Not directly, but it's obvious who she's talking about. She's trying to make you look unstable." Dad's response was immediate and protective. "That's defamation, son. She's trying to damage your reputation and business prospects. Have you talked to a lawyer about this?" The most frustrating part was how calculated it all was. Nothing directly actionable, just a steady campaign to plant seeds of doubt about my stability and judgment. They were trying to isolate me professionally while I was trying to build something from scratch. Nathan wanted to handle it more directly. "Give me William's address. I'll go have a conversation with him about appropriate boundaries." Nathan, no. That's exactly what they want, to make me look like the unstable one. We handled this the right way. Frank's project was a massive success. Delivery times improved by 30%, storage costs dropped by 40%, and customer satisfaction scores went through the roof. More importantly, Frank was impressed enough to refer me to 2 other companies in his network. "You know your stuff," he told me after reviewing the results, "but I got to ask, why'd you leave a good corporate job to go out on your own? That's a hell of a risk." I gave him the sanitized version about wanting to build something myself, but Frank had been around long enough to read between the lines. Well, their loss is everyone else's gain. You've got clients for life here. Word was starting to spread in the Chicago logistics community, but I could still feel the shadow of William's influence. Meetings would go great until someone mentioned checking references. Then suddenly they'd need more time to evaluate options. The real test was coming and I knew it. Around month 5 I was finally starting to feel like the business had real momentum. Word of mouth was bringing steady referrals, and I was actually turning down projects that didn't fit my focus. That's when Brittany decided to escalate from behind-the-scenes sabotage to direct confrontation. I was grabbing lunch at Portillo's near my office when she walked in. Not a coincidence, she'd clearly been tracking my movements somehow. The moment she spotted me, she marched over with that entitled smile that used to make my skin crawl. "Christopher, what a surprise seeing you here," she said, loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "I was just telling Mother how worried we've all been about you." She sat down at my table without invitation, continuing her performance for other customers. "You know, everyone's been asking about you, how you're doing since your episode. It's so brave of you to try starting your own little business." The condescension was thick enough to cut. She kept referring to my breakdown, and how the family was concerned about my decision-making. Made it sound like I was some unstable ex-boyfriend who'd had a mental collapse. "I actually have a meeting in 10 minutes, I told her, hoping she'd take the hint. "Oh, with a real client?" she asked with fake concern. "That's wonderful. You know, if this little consulting thing doesn't work out, Daddy might be willing to put in a good word for you somewhere. He feels terrible about how everything ended." She genuinely couldn't comprehend that I might succeed without her family's help. In her mind, I was just playing dress up until I came crawling back. But then she crossed the line, started asking the guy at the next table if he'd heard about how difficult it was for small businesses to survive, especially when the owner was dealing with personal issues. I stood up and told her this conversation was over. That's when the entitled monster really emerged. "Don't you dare walk away from me," she said loud enough to make everyone stop eating. "I'm trying to help you. You think you can just pretend like we never happened, like you didn't spend 5 years living off my family's generosity?" The whole restaurant was staring now. She kept getting louder, talking about how I was ungrateful and delusional if I thought I could make it without their connections. "My father gave you a career. I gave you 5 years of my life, and this is how you repay us? By embarrassing our family and pretending you're some big-shot entrepreneur?" The manager finally came over and asked her to lower her voice. She turned on him with full Karen fury, demanding to know if he knew who she was and threatening to speak to corporate about customer service. I walked out while she was still berating the manager about the kind of people he was allowing in his establishment. My lawyer friend, Tony Ricci, echoed Nathan's concerns when I called him for advice. "What she did today isn't just harassment, it's defamation. She's making false statements about your mental health in public. That's actionable." Within a week, we had documentation and sent a cease and desist letter to the whole family. But I knew it wouldn't stop them. If anything, it would make them angrier. And I was right. The real fireworks were just beginning. 2 years later, my business employed 12 people and had moved to a beautiful office in River North. I was dating an amazing interior designer named Isabella who treated me like an equal partner, not a project to be managed. That's when I got the news that changed everything. Nathan called me on a Tuesday morning. "Chris, did you see the Tribune? William got arrested for embezzlement." The federal investigation had been building for months. Hundreds of thousands in company funds diverted to personal expenses, family vacations charged as business development, Catherine's shopping sprees categorized as client entertainment, even Brittany's car payments funneled through fake consulting contracts. Within weeks, their whole world collapsed. William was fired without severance, facing 3 years in federal prison. They had to sell the Lincoln Park mansion, the cars, everything. Brittany moved back in with her parents in a 1-bedroom apartment in Schaumburg. That's when she showed up at my office one last time. "Christopher," she said quietly, barely recognizable from the woman who'd once commanded rooms. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I really need to talk to you." Gone were the expensive clothes and entitled posture. This was someone who'd been beaten down by reality. "I know what we did to you was wrong," she continued, hands shaking. "We lost everything. Dad's going to prison and we have nothing left. Mother's working at Target. I'm waiting tables at some diner in Elgin." The audacity was breathtaking. "Maybe you could hire me," she said, unable to meet my eyes. "I know I don't have experience, but I could learn. I'm good with people. I could do sales or customer service." Nathan walked through my door at that moment. I texted him when she arrived. Everything okay here? He asked, eyes locked on Brittany. I let her finish before responding. Then I looked around at my successful business, my team of respected employees, the life I'd built with my own hands. Brittany, 2 years ago, you stood in our apartment and told me I was nothing without your father's help. You tried to destroy my business when I left. You violated a restraining order to harass my girlfriend. And now you're sitting in the office of the company I built, asking me for charity. She flinched at every word but didn't interrupt. The answer is no. You're not here because you're sorry for how you treated me. You're here because you need something from me. Nathan stepped forward. I think it's time for you to leave. She started crying harder. But we have nothing left. We don't know what we're going to do. Figure it out the same way everyone else does, I said, standing up. Work hard. Make better choices. And stop expecting other people to solve your problems. 2 weeks later, Isabella and I got married. Small ceremony, close friends and family, everything their wedding wasn't. Built on love instead of status, partnership instead of control. During the reception, Dad pulled me aside. Your mother and I are so proud of the man you've become. You built something real and handled all that drama with more class than they deserved. 2 years ago, Brittany told me I was nothing without her family. Today, she basically admitted they were nothing without their stolen money and fake connections. Turns out I was everything without them.